Hi, Whitney. Good evening. We're going to wait a little while for your classmates.
Good evening.
Hi, Josh. Good evening.
Hi, Drea. How are you?
Good, thanks. We're going to wait hasta 10, guys, hasta 2 more minutes. Pero sí, a modo de esperar.
Okay.
Dale. All right, you guys. Hi, everybody. It's already 7:08, so I think we can go ahead and start. Además que ya somos 3. Bueno, 4. So if you guys can turn on your camera, please, so we can start the class. All right. So this week, we're going to continue with speaking, but we're going to practice the 4th type of question. Can you guys tell me a little bit what you've seen in your class? Maybe que les han dicho sobre este tipo de pregunta, en qué consiste. Me confirman que me escuchan bien, chicos, because está un poco entrecortada mi imagen. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Whitney. Okay, so dígame un poco, porfa, sobre este cuarto tipo de pregunta de speaking. ¿En qué consiste? Leandro?
I don't remember good because I entered with a retard the last class.
Okay, don't worry. So this last task is also integrated because we're using información de base. No, it gives us a lecture. It's just listening. So en base a este lecture, que es igual un poco más académico, un poco más, un lenguaje un poco más pesadito, we just have to make a summary. That's it. Just summarize the lecture. Igual es una lección bastante breve. Lo máximo que duran es 4 or 5 minutes. So in this speaking task, we just have to make a summary. Igual en 60 segundos. Tienen 30 segundos para preparar su respuesta and 60 seconds to give your answer. So con eso, antes de empezar, do you guys have any questions? Algo que les preocupe de antemano before we start? All right, igual me imagino que les han explicado cuáles son los temas. Since this is kind of lecture, academic lectures, cubre temas de biología, de física, de literatura, de historia, so a bunch of different things, but más o menos hay un porcentaje de cuánto te pregunto, cuán probable es que te toquen temas de uno u otro tipo. Okay, so eso, we're gonna go ahead and start then, si no hay ninguna duda. Listo. So same as always, guys. First, we're going to listen to the lecture. It's just a listening. And then we have 30 seconds to prepare the response and 60 seconds to speak. For pointers, igual me imagino que les han dado un poco cómo es la estructura de cómo deberían armar un poco su respuesta. You should introduce the topic first and then mention 2 points the lecture makes with its examples or arguments. No, con la misma estructura de casi todos. Introduction and 2 points. So eso lo toman en cuenta. And the same thing, para listening, for anything that's listening, listen to where they put emphasis, where they use keywords. Remember keywords, palabras clave. Yes. So we're going to listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a physics class.
Have any of you wondered how exactly planes are able to fly even though they're so much heavier than air? There are actually a couple of ways we can answer that. The first way, the easier way, I think, is based on Newton's third law. That law says that when you push something, there is push back. So think about a wing. It's slanted up, right? The front of the wing is higher than the back. And as the plane moves through the air, that air goes under the wing. It gets pushed down by the slant. And when that air is pushed down, as we said, it has to push back. It pushes up. So there's a lot of air getting pushed down by that angle of the wing. And it's all pushing back up, pushing the plane into the air. The second answer has to do with something called Bernoulli's principle, which is about how fluids work. And when I say fluids, that includes gases too, not just liquids. This principle, it says that as the speed of a fluid, in this case air, as the speed of the air decreases, pressure increases. And also as speed goes up, pressure goes down. So in other words, the faster the air is moving, the less the pressure. The slower it is moving, the more the pressure. Get it? Speed and pressure are opposite. They're inversely correlated. We won't worry too much about how this works, but just know that because the way a wing is designed, air moves faster on the top of the wing than on the bottom of the wing. So that means the air on top, where the air is moving fast, has low pressure, and the air on the bottom of the wing, where the air is moving slowly, has high pressure. The difference in pressure pushes the wing upward into the sky.
Using points and examples.
Okay, guys, before we listen to the question, ¿qué tal les ha parecido the lecture? Is there anything you didn't understand?
It's physics class, and I don't know exactly the words, but I have a little idea.
Okay, thank you, Whitney. Yeah, it's lo que les decía. Sometimes if the topic is a little hard, the lecture is going to be a little difficult to understand. Honestly, when I heard this one, I was also like, what? Pero, so don't worry about that. Pero, ¿hay alguna información que les falta? ¿Sienten que les falta información para poder armar su respuesta? Or can you work with what you have?
I miss all the two subtopics. The exact words that he used.
Okay, in this case, in this specific audio, he o sea, los menciona incluso, no voy a dar dos razones. So he states that he's going to mention two of them. Y ahora vamos a volver a escuchar, ¿no? In the real test, you can't, pero vamos a entender fully the audio before we move on to speaking. A ver, veamos. So, como que el primer punto está somewhere around here.
Slanted up, right?
Aquí lo menciona.
Something, there is push. Newton's
Yeah.
third law.
Yeah.
The first way, the easier way, I think, is based on Newton's third law.
So the first point he mentions is the third law, right? So eso, keywords. And this one igual se notaba bastante los keywords. And then he gives some examples of how that works. And the second point también tiene un nombrecito científico, right? ¿Qué se llama?
The second answer has to do with something called Bernoulli's principle, which is about how fluids work. And when I say fluids,
So the second thing is Bernoulli's principle, and he also explains it con ejemplos. All right, any other question? Anything that wasn't clear? Don't be afraid to ask, guys, porque en el examen de verdad, you can't ask. All right, so ahora sí vamos a escuchar la pregunta, and then we're going to take 30 seconds to prepare.
slowly has high pressure. The wing upward into the sky.
A ver, ahora sí.
Using points and examples from the lecture, summarize the two explanations of how planes are able to fly.
Okay,
Now listen to part of a lecture.
sorry. So there's the question. Using points and examples from the lecture, summarize the two explanations of how planes are able to fly. Also, tip de la vida, a veces la introducción o el tema general del que se tiene que hablar is in the question. So you can use this to introduce the topic. The lecture explains how planes are able to fly, blah, 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 blah. Yes. Ahora sí, 30 seconds, guys, to prepare, starting now. All right, who would like to share their response? Juan, what about you? Would you like to share?
Teacher, I didn't come yesterday and I don't know how to do this.
All right.
Can someone else please do it?
Okay, don't worry. Ahora vas a ver los ejemplos, and in the next one, ya vuelves más listo. So someone else who would like to voluntariamente, o los escojo al azar. Whitney, what about you?
Okay, no problem.
Unos 60 segundos. Ahora sí, your 60 seconds to speak. Start now.
Okay, well, this listening passage is an academic physics class about how planes are able to fly. And the moves when someone pushes something and the angle influence this pushback. Furthermore, talk about of gases, not just liquids, expand pressure in the atmospheres, and the moving is limited to this pressure in their environment. Also, low pressure gives an object a low movement, and high pressure limits to an object its movement is lower.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't know exactly what the words say.
All right. Ahora sí. Te faltaban unos 10 segundos. So, sí, había maybe a little closing idea at the end to fill in that time. Bueno, ahorita vamos a ver. How do you feel with your answer, Whitney?
I practice listening, but my big problem is about the chemicals or physical. I can't understand.
Yeah, a ver, the first 15 seconds, más o menos la introducción que deberían dar, ¿no? Introducir de qué se habla, the context, everything should be about 15 seconds. So como que el primer cuarto de todo el tiempo. And the introduction was really good in the right amount of time. It was concise and it had all the information it needed. I feel the first reason, though, the first thing he mentioned about Newton's third law was a little short. You mentioned it, but you didn't fully extend. No dice muchos ejemplos, you didn't mention a lot about that part. And I think that's where your time was a little short. If you had explained the first reason a little bit more or mentioned the examples, that would have filled in the time perfectly. The second reason was very, very well extended. So it extended all the time it needed, but the second one was very good. The first one was a little faltaba información. Era la primera parte that you had some trouble listening or understanding?
Yes.
De la parte de la ley de Newton, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if that happens, guys, see, like, this is gonna happen. Les va a pasar alguna vez. Como les digo, si no es su área, you may not fully understand all the vocabulary, everything that's used. So you kind of have to use your conocimiento general como palanca. So if you guys no saben en general, al menos que existen las leyes de Newton, so you can kind of use that as a reference. Oh, he mentioned Newton's law. Okay, acordarme de eso to use it in the answer. Also, keywords igual, siempre, guys. Listen to keywords to mention them in the answer. So, eso, thank you, Whitney. Aparte de eso del tiempito y de the first reason, wonderful response. The second reason was very well explained. One more for this one. Would anyone like to answer? Josh, would you like to give it a try?
Okay, I can do it.
Dale, te pongo un minuto. And your 60 seconds start now.
The lecture is about how planes are able to fly. After introducing the topic, the professor features two principles that apply to this phenomenon. To start, the lecturer describes the Newton's third law, which is when you push something, it pushes back. For instance, when the plane is on the air, the pressure is pushing back and the air is pushing up in the contrary direction. Then the professor goes to explain the Bernoulli's principle, which is a fluid, which applies to fluids and gases. And it says as the speed of the air decreases, the pressure increases and vice versa. To illustrate, he mentions the air and the top of the plane is going so fast, so the pressure is lower than the bottom of the plane where the air is slow and the pressure is stronger.
All right, thank you, Josh. You extended the time a little bit. So, a ver, vamos a verlo por partecitas. I really think this was an ideal answer. Everything was explained, all the information was there. The vocabulary you used was very good. The connectors as well, you guys, como siempre saben, los conectores unen todo, and it really makes everything flow better. So the, for instance, the referencing also the lecture, the lecture mentions that, blah, blah, blah. It sounded really good. The only thing is the time. I think you have to speak a little bit faster. Es eso, o sea, la información te entraba toda en tu un minuto if you spoke a little bit faster. But the structure, everything was wonderful. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, I spent some time trying to find some words.
Yeah, igual el vocabulario. Por eso, guys, Google vocabulary lists, Google connectors lists, y les va a facilitar mucho la vida. All right, we're going to go on to the next example. All right, we're going to listen, and remember, guys, los mismos consejos, listen to keywords, and pay attention to the two examples or the two sections they give.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a sociology class. Let's consider the way sociologists use the terms culture and society. A society is a distinct group of people. A sociologist would say that people in a society are defined by their social interactions and the culture they share. Meanwhile, culture itself can be defined as that society's shared knowledge, beliefs, and expectations. Often people think of a society as something really, well, big. And sure, that's true. An entire nation, for example, will generally have some common thread of culture that defines it. The most obvious example is that citizens of one region generally speak a common language. But think about behavioral standards too. Like what's considered polite or impolite? Whereas in one country, you might be expected to take off your shoes as the guest in another's home. In other countries, that might be considered strange. Cultural traits like that can extend over enormous populations. But a society can also be much smaller, much simpler. Take this class. Aren't we a society? We have social interactions with each other every week. And I think it's fair to say we have a culture of a sort too. Think back to what happened on the second day of class. Do you all remember? I'd missed my train and didn't have any way to let you all know that I'd be late. But in contrast to other classes, where students might have just headed home 15 minutes after the planned start time, each and every one of you waited the full 30 minutes it took me to arrive. That kind of set expectations, right? It laid the foundation for a culture of patience, something I think is still true of this particular group, this little society. Using points and...
Okay, before we listen to the question, how do you feel about this one? Was it difficult? Is there anything you didn't understand? Era un poco más fácil than the other one? ¿Alguna duda? Okay, so before we listen to the question, igual, in this case, he also gives two sections to his lecture, kind of. In the first half, he gives definitions of what culture is, how it works in society, blah, 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 blah. And in the second half, he explains how it doesn't just apply to big societies, but to little societies, like a classroom, like his class, y da su ejemplo. Esas son las dos secciones in this case. So with that in mind, vamos a... sorry, the question. I forgot.
Now listen to part of a lecture. Society. Using points and examples from the lecture, explain how a society can be a large group of people or a very small group.
Okay, so that's the question, guys. Also, remember, you need to answer the question, ver qué está pidiendo exactamente la pregunta. So the answer has to be why this, o sea, especialmente el ejemplo de why the small group, why the class can also be a society. So 30 seconds to prepare, starting now. All right, who would like to share their answer? Oscar, would you like to try?
Hello, teacher. I didn't hear the example. I get the concept, but I didn't hear the example, or I didn't get it.
All right, es que no lo escuchaste or you didn't really understand the information?
I understood the concept, but the example I didn't hear because I have already entered to my house and I didn't hear.
Okay, dale, don't worry. So someone else then. Juan, would you like to try this one?
I don't understand the examples so well. It's like I understand the concept, but not the examples really.
A ver, anyone else who had a problem with the example, understanding the example? A ver, then let's try with Leandro.
And I was about to say that I had problems understanding the example also.
Okay, so let's go back to listen to the audio. Vamos a volver a escuchar y entender bien esta partecita. So the concept, you guys get it, right? When he explains what culture is, he mentions that it's más mi área, so I can understand this better too. Pero he mentions that culture is when people share certain values, pretty much, right? And he gives some examples, like taking off your shoes when you go into someone's home. Lo que hacen en Japón, ¿verdad? Te tienes que sacar los zapatos. But in some societies, that might be weird. So that's culture, something a society shares. Then he gives the example of his class. Y esa es la pregunta. ¿Por qué una sociedad puede ser algo muy grande o algo muy chiquito, like his class? He says that one class, he couldn't be there on time. Ha llegado tarde, o directamente creo que ha llegado media hora después, algo así. And he couldn't tell his students. So, en vez de irse 15 minutos después, which we all usually do, o sea, no llega el docente y chao. But his class stayed there. They waited for him. They waited like 30 minutes hasta que llegó y pasaron la clase. So he mentions that as an example of a value, un valor que ellos comparten como cultura, como una mini sociedad. Y también menciona algunas cosas. I think he mentions, vamos a escuchar.
Now list populations. But a society can also be much smaller,
Ahí menciona el segundo punto, ¿no? A society can also be much smaller. ¿Por qué puede ser chiquita? Y da el ejemplo de su curso.
simpler. Take this class. Aren't we a society? We have social interactions with each other every week. And I think it's fair to say we have a culture of a sort too. Think back to what happened on the second day of class. Do you all remember? I'd missed my train and didn't have any way to let you all know that I'd be late.
So there he mentions the example, right? He was going to be late and...
But in contrast to other classes, where students might have just headed home 15 minutes after the planned start time, each and every one of you waited the full 30 minutes it took me to arrive. That kind of set expectations, right? It laid the foundation for a culture of patience, something I think is still true of this particular group, this little society.
Okay, so he mentions that, su valor, como que una pequeña cultura, and that their class is a little society. Eso es el ejemplo. Is it more clear now? Algo que todavía les haya quedado un poco incomplete? Ok, sí, ahora ya está más claro. Ahora sí, en la primera parte, any questions de los conceptos, anything? Okay, pues ahora sí. So again, guys, 30 seconds to prepare your answer con ahora eso aclarado. Starting now. Okay, ahora sí, voluntarily, who feels ready to share their response? Rosario, would you like to try? No? Come on, someone, alguien, ofrézcase.
Sorry, teacher, I will try, but I was late to the class, so I'm not sure.
Okay, pero a ver, con más o menos de estructura, as long as you have all the information, dale un intento, okay? Okay, don't be nervous.
I want to hear a classmate first, and then I will try it, I promise.
All right, dale, Rosario. So someone else who would like to ser una primera víctima? Some brave soul? Alguien.
Teacher, I can try.
Okay, dale, Oscar. All right, te pongo un minuto, and it starts now.
The lecture is about the definition of a culture. The professor says that in the sociology class, the culture could be understood in two ways. First, the first example is about with a class where the values are shared in the example of leaving later when the teacher is late. And the second definition is that culture could be understood in little groups. The example says that in one course could be appear some values, some own values and some own rules. That's why the sociology has these two definitions.
All
That's
right.
all.
Thank you, Oscar. Y solo te faltaban unos 3, 2, 1. All right. So regarding time, perfect. Right around the 1 minute mark. Ahora vemos un poco la estructura. The introduction was good. I think justo igual 45 seconds long. You mentioned the 2 points that were going to be discussed. So up to there, perfect. I think though, in the order you described the 2 examples, you did mention de qué iba a tratar la primera parte, but you didn't fully give all the examples. Es cierto que podía haber dado un poquito mejor ejemplo. Like he mentioned the thing about cuando define los valores, o cuando define what culture is, what a society is. He gives the example of lo de los zapatos, and he also gives a definition de qué es la sociedad, qué es la cultura. So maybe a brief, sí es esa misma definición, pero mucho más compactadita. In the first concept, and in the second example, ahí hubiera sido explicar un poco más este caso de los estudiantes, which you did in the first half. No, but it was the second part. Toda la información que estaba en el primero, bajarlo al segundo ejemplo. So, eso. But I think you finally understood the information. No, the information was there in la primera parte, but it was all there. It was all understood. So, es un poco el orden. Thank you, Oscar.
Okay, teacher, thank you.
Ahora sí, Rosario, wanna give it a try?
Okay, teacher.
All right. Te pongo un minuto. And you can give your answer now.
Okay. In the class, the professor talked about society culture. That means how people share values. He gave two examples. First, it was about big groups, like big societies, maybe cities that share knowledge, beliefs, and culture. For example, the language or cultural traits. And the second example was of very small groups like the class and the way that they share the behave, that all have the same behave in the class.
All right. Anything else?
And I just have that in my notes.
All right. Thank you, Rosario. Te faltaban todavía 10 segundos. Ahí está. Ya está. Okay, so it was a little short, but ahorita lo vamos a ver. The intro, perfect. All the information was there. The first example and the second example were also very clear. I love that you remembered all the keywords, like all the important words that had to be there were there. The examples were very well explained, so very well described. Pero igual, lo importante es we have to look to answer the question. So aquí nos preguntan how a society can be a large group or a small group. So hay que responder según con estos ejemplos, how estos valores, esta definición de cultura, de sociedad, puede aplicarse a un grupo grande y un grupo pequeño. Eso lo arreglamos con una oración, ¿ok? Antes de explicar la segunda parte, puedes decir, these values or these definitions don't just apply to big groups or to countries, but to small groups like a classroom. Listo. Y ahí dices la diferencia, ¿no? Esta es la diferencia. También puede ser para grupos chiquitos. Y ahí explicas ya normal como has hecho toda la segunda parte. Igual estaban ahí todos los ejemplos, todos. So, con esa oración se respondía la pregunta y llenaba ese tiempito. Other than that, perfect. Thank you, Rosario. Igual clave, keywords, guys. Eso realmente llena. You saw how mentioning all the keywords mentioned in the lecture makes an answer a lot more solid. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last one of these. Último ejemplo. Any questions? In the meantime, algo que les haya estado dificultando. Understanding the listening is the kind of parte más difícil, right? So,
Yes,
guys.
yes, it's so difficult.
It is, but also keywords. Siempre escuchen keywords. If you don't really know the word, si es una palabra de vocabulario nueva, at least listen to the emphasis, donde ponen énfasis en la voz, because esa palabra es importante. Okay, so we're going to listen to the last one.
Now, listen to part of a lecture in a biology class. Let's talk about two kinds of biological selection. Two different ways that traits are selected in a species of animal as it breeds and reproduces. First, there's natural selection. Here, living things develop features that help them survive in a certain kind of climate, escape from a certain kind of predator, that sort of thing. In contrast, we have artificial selection. Artificial selection happens outside of what we'd call nature. It happens when people deliberately breed living things for their own use. Now, it's true that natural selection and artificial selection both give a living thing the traits it needs to reproduce and survive. But these two types of biological selection also have very different effects, obviously. Maybe one of the easiest places to see this difference is with wolves and dogs. Let's start with wolves. So, what's a wolf's job? It's to survive in the wild and get enough to eat, right? So certain qualities are naturally selected. Wolves need keen senses so they can detect prey. They need to be fast, strong, and aggressive to catch their prey and to survive even in the harshest weather. Wolves that are born with these qualities live longer and pass the qualities on to their pups. That's natural selection. But a dog's job, its role in its environment, is a little different. Dogs don't need to survive in the wild. They need human protection. So to survive, a breed of dog needs to have traits that humans want. Take the golden retriever. People bred a dog big enough to be a good hunter, but not so big that it was hard to control. And it had to be obedient, unlike a wolf, right? A golden retriever has to be, well, friendly in order to be well-liked enough that we humans decide to breed it, so we can get similarly friendly puppies, more pets. Using points and examples from the talk.
Okay, before we listen to the question, is there anything that wasn't clear? In this case, igual está partido en dos. In the first half, he also gives the concepts kind of the difference between natural selection and artificial selection. And in the second half, he gives the examples of wolves versus dogs. Maybe the example or the concepts.
I had difficult understanding the artificial selection, the concept.
Okay, the concept. So let's listen again to the concept.
We have artificial selection. Artificial selection happens outside of what we call nature. It happens when people deliberately breed living things for their own use. Now, it's true that natural selection and artificial selection both give a living thing the traits it needs.
Okay, so we have some keywords. We have outside of nature. So, no como definición general, what's artificial is what's not natural. So a keyword could be outside of nature. And another word he used que was also a keyword was
natural selection and artificial selection both give a living things for their own use. Now, it's true that natural selection and what we call nature. It happens when people deliberately breed living.
There's another keyword, deliberate. So eso es importante. La selección artificial is a decision that someone makes, es deliberado. No ocurre por su cuenta. So deliberate is also a keyword.
Deliberate is deliberado?
Yes. I'm going to spell it for you guys in the chat. Deliberately or deliberate. All right. Any other questions? Okay, so let's listen to the question.
More pets.
Uh,
Using points and examples from the talk, explain the two types of biological selection.
So there's the question. We have to explain the two types, natural selection and artificial selection. So you could partirlo así, ¿no? En la primera parte, dar el concepto y el ejemplo de natural selection, and en la segunda parte, dar el concepto y ejemplo of artificial selection. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds. Starting now. Okay, who would like to share their answer? Whitney, how about you?
Okay.
Dale. So, un minuto. And your 60 seconds start now.
Okay, well, this listening passage is an academic class about two kinds of natural selection. First of all, natural selection is an instinctive acting in order to survive. Usually, some animals have this instinct prompt to the predator, and two artificial selections happen with mature. and this decided doesn't occur naturally. Some examples that he gives is about the holes in holes. There are wolves and dogs, and these wolves had these sensors to aggressive to survive with other animals, and dogs like a golden retriever maintain the control, friendly and like a puppy.
All right. Thank you, Whitney. How did you feel with your answer? Did you get nervous at any point?
Yeah, I don't take good notes. I read all and I can understand my letter.
That's also, no, don't worry. Es igual cosa de práctica of getting to know your notes. Pero at the moment of taking notes, since it's usually going to have this structure, las lecciones tienen, ¿no? Su introducción, su parte 1, parte 2. Kind of try to listen to dónde están esas partes. Lo menciona, ¿no? En some hemos visto, I'm going to give 2 reasons for blah, 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 blah. So try to listen to those para que ya puedas tener una estructura de apuntes, ¿no? Main idea de que estamos hablando, punto A, punto B, y palabras clave, that's it. Porque igual, if we write a lot, luego al momento de hablar, we're like, ¿qué de todo esto me sirve? So, yes, igual es categorizar un poco más los apuntes.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
All right. Luego, I wanted to correct in the beginning, you said there were 2 types of natural selection. When, igual, guys, always pay attention to the question, porque natural es solo un tipo de los dos, right? Los dos tipos eran natural and artificial. Lo que son los dos are biological selection. So, esa era la palabrita al introducirlo, digamos. And yeah, so other than that, I think the examples were clear. You went a little bit off on the time, pero I also noticed you got a little nervous somewhere in the middle, but you saved it wonderfully. Like you stumbled on a word and you were like, oh, sorry. And then you gave us the correct word. So eso igual, guys, if you ever get nervous, like hagan eso, like take 2 seconds to say, oh, sorry, and continue. Now don't freak out, don't get nervous. Esa salvada es clave. And yeah, other than that, I think it was a good answer. So thank you, Whitney. One more for this one. Who would like to share their answer?
I would like to, Drea, please.
Dale, Josh. Te pongo tu 1 minuto. And your 1 minute starts now.
The lecture is about biological selection. After introducing the topic, the professor features 2 types of biological selection. To start, the lecturer describes natural selection. It happens in nature and is the differential survival and reproduction of individuals due to the environment. To illustrate, he mentions the wolves who are aggressive in order to survive and find something to eat. They need to be strong and fast to catch his food. On the other hand, the professor goes on to explain artificial selection. It happens outside nature and it has human participation. To illustrate this, he mentions the dogs who needs humans to survive. They are obedient, friendly, and they need to be pets in order to have a good relation with the humans.
All right, Josh, thank you. Wonderful, wonderful answer. Vocabulary, also connectors, igual 10 de 10. Keywords, I think everything that was said was present. I also, igual guys, otra clave de la vida es kind of parafrasear, ¿no? O sea, no repetir tal cual está la frase, sino poner sus propias palabras, sus propias ideas. And I also noticed that as well, like you fully, muestra que entienden, really, you lo han captado y lo han reconceptualizado in your own words. So eso igual se nota bastante, you fully understood it. And you spoke a little bit faster, así que the timing was perfect, no 1 exact minute. Eso igual, guys, if you want to practice the time, para ver más o menos a qué velocidad tienen que hablar, pónganse su temporizadorcito and kind of, no sé, si tienen TikTok o pretend you're recording a class o un TikTok de algo, un tema que ustedes conozcan muy bien. And eso, calculen cuánto les tardaría hablar, cuánto calculan 1 minuto de hablar. So, eso, thank you, Josh. Really good answer.
Thanks, Drea.
All right, so we're gonna leave it there. Ya lo vamos a dejar ahí. I don't know if you guys have any questions for this, if any part was difficult. ¿Qué tal les ha parecido this type of task?
I think it was kind of difficult to me to understand all the vocabulary that the lecturer says. So yeah, maybe I need to read more about this topic.
Igual les han debido explicar, hay un porcentaje, a ver, ahorita voy a ver, of how likely it is. ¿Les han dicho ese detallito? ¿Qué tan probable es que les toque de tal o tal tema?
Sí,
Yes.
no nos dijeron.
All right, so sí más o menos ubican how likely it is. Y saben, ¿no? If it's something in your area, pueden estar un poco más confiados. If it's not, you don't really need to tampoco así volverte experto en física. Just go ahead and pay attention to keywords. Es lo mejor que les puedo decir. Busquen palabras claves al escuchar. All right, anything else? ¿Algún comentario? Okay, so, a ver, un ratito les saco esto. I'm going to take a pic of the attendance and sorry guys, I forgot that I had it. Ahora sí. Y bueno, les envío su encuestita. And ya saben, guys, pueden llenar la encuesta y ya pueden salir de la reunión. So it was great seeing you guys today, and I will see you on Friday. Good evening, guys. Take care.
Thank you,
Gracias,
teacher.
good evening.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, teacher. Thank you very much.
Bye, guys. See you.